racist.
Well, that's where the audio picks up.
That's really funny. No, it's totally fine.
All right. We are live. There's a lag with YouTube though. So I'm going to have to do some crazy echo, and then I'm going to have to turn the YouTube volume off really quickly. There we go. Okay. Welcome everybody to the 5th episode of Advertising the Apocalypse. We're so sorry for the long wait over summer, but I really am a disaster over the summer because my house is so full of children all the time. So, but they're back in school, and that gives me just like a second to like be able to, even though this is on the weekend, it's like during the week that I have to like make a graphic and post a link and all those things. So thank you for everyone who's joining us after our hiatus. Saffana, you've been crushing it lately on social media. Oh my God. Incredible.
I don't know what's happened. I was saying this to my husband. I was like, I don't think I've done anything different. I've just shared more, maybe, but it's the same stuff that I've been doing from the beginning. And I was like, it just feels like someone went, have you heard about Saffana? But they didn't tell me that they were going to do that. And I woke up one day and I showed it to my younger cousin because I'm not very technologically savvy. And I was like, is this what bots do? Are these bots or are they real followers? And then she was like, they're likely bots because that stuff doesn't happen. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, dismissed it. And then it just kept on going and people started, responding. And then people were like DMing me. And I was like, oh, this is a real, anyways. So I didn't do it.
It was really good. You know what I think you're doing really well. And you said this in your video. I get to spend all this time with you, and I have been loving all your content and watching all of it. And you're all over my feed. So one, the algorithm is smiling on you. And I think you're very clever about saying what you need to say in a way that everyone understands what it's about, but without like kind of tripping the algorithm's tripwires. You're very good at that. The other thing, I think, like the skit you did was really funny. You're communicating like some pretty simple thing. And it's like in the video you said about your mom who's a teacher, where like being a teacher is like saying the same few things over and over and over again in different ways. And you're making a few points that everyone needs to hear about media literacy very clearly and coherently, but in different ways, so that every time you watch a video, it's like the understanding deepens a little bit. And you're funny, and you got the whiteboard, and you've just been crushing it. No, I've been watching your videos and being like, oh, what a good opener. Like, what a good opening line. Savannah's not bearing the lead. And I haven't been making any content because
what's that? But it's the kids.
It's the kids, and then I have a book under deadline that was supposed to be turned in May.
How exciting, though.
And now I'm rewriting the whole thing. Because turns out I'm like a very different person than who I was when I wrote this book before the genocide began. So I'm like, it's got to be rewritten.
Well, you know what? There's a silver lining to that. I think if something like this, the outcome of it is it changes you. Mm-hmm. I think that's cool for you.
Well, I guess. For people who don't know what this podcast is, maybe you're tuning in for the first time. Welcome to Advertising the Apocalypse, where we talk about critical thinking, media literacy, and figuring out how the elites are selling us on our own doom and destruction. I'm Sim Kern. I'm a former high school rhetoric teacher and an author. And this is Saffana Monajed. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm actually a media marketing person by trade. So that means that my job is to write the words that make you think, do, and believe stuff, which means I can see when other people do it. And then I try to use my powers for good to let you know how we're getting got. And then I met Sim on the internet, and here we are.
Here we are. And I love the opportunity to talk to you once a month.
Same.
And learn from you. I've been, since our last conversation about, I didn't bring it in here, but I'm reading more because my next book is going to be about climate change. So I'm reading another, the last book we read was The Day the World Stopped Shopping. And you pointed out like just how colonial and white the perspective of the author is. And then I also watched that video you made about how you annotate. And I am not that organized. I was like, that's such a good idea. I should do it. But one thing I liked you saying is you talk back to the author while you're writing. And just like thinking about it that way. So I've been reading this new book called Beloved Beasts, which purports to be a history of the conservation movement.
Like I'm already liking your feedback. I love it.
Worldwide, a history of conservation. Every chapter in this book is a biography of a white person in a history of conservation. And it's not a bad book. I just wish it was honest about what it was. Like, and the author does discuss with some nuance, you know, the impacts of colonialism. And she's not like lauding some of these people, especially in the earlier chapters, they were eugenicists. They were openly racist. They wanted to protect animals so they could hunt them, you know. Mm-hmm. But like, just say this is the book about the history of white people's conservation, not the global history of the conservation.
Yeah, because no one's dismissing that it's an important perspective.
Yeah.
But what we are saying is that's not the whole perspective.
Yeah.
So, and then if you ground me in believing that that's the whole perspective, I've missed out on the entire perspective. So that's wild. So, and I think that's the thing that always comes up when I push back on books. I'm like, listen, I'm not discrediting the book, but I think the book should preface with, this is a very Western centrist book. And I think that's fine.
Do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do that. But like, be honest. Be honest. So that's what I kept doing. In like talking back to the author, there'll be sentences like, and then people started talking about the importance of biodiversity for the first time. I'm like, when I'm writing in, white people started talking about the importance of I'm pretty sure indigenous cultures had like some sense.
Absolutely. And also there's okay, to add, I don't know, I think we're going to be talking about something else, but all this stuff about, because I often get asked about how do we pitch the idea of preserving the planet, right? And what's the move? And actually the fundamentals we always get to is people have a very different perception on what our relationship should be to nature in its essence, right? So when we read a book like this West of like what you said there was actually very important, of like, I need these animals to still exist so I can hunt them. So this idea of our relationship to what nature is are we here to dominate it, or are we here to preserve it? Because once you have to contend with that as a foundation, because if you are telling people we must preserve this planet for that, they'll be like, I'll be dead before, and that's it, the conversation finishes, right? But then if we come to who are the people who fundamentally believe they are those who are in charge of looking after nature, then it becomes a productive conversation, right? Yeah. So again, it's that who believes that, whose foundation is this, and then can we begin to have a generally like a productive conversation? Otherwise, it does become very like, why, like, why should I? Yeah.
Well, and the lack of awareness that like white people in Western white European culture had the most alienated and toxic relationship with the natural world than arguably any other people on the planet. And yet this book is focusing on how certain individuals from that super alienated from nature community decided to become conservationists and had an impact among other white people. And so that is important to talk about. That is interesting. It's important. But you're still addressing the root cause. Look at the history of, you know, if you're a white person, look at the history of other white person. But to pretend that these are the most influential people in the history of conservation, and not have any in-depth discussion of indigenous conservation practices is just, and I mean, she's defining conservation as like this institutional Western colonial thing.
But again, I think that's
okay. The way the book is pitched, that's not clear.
Yeah. Okay. So an important concept, actually, which does bring us to what we're doing in terms of what it is we're doing, is the idea of framing. And what, in my opinion, by calling even something colonial, decolonialize my mind, conservation, you've picked the frame. So you've put me in a frame where I have to now conserve. And then you go, who's looking after conservation? But actually, the thing is that I think one of the reasons that's a losing battle when you go, and you're looking for conservation, it's like, are you over there indigenous? They'd be like, actually, we don't call it that. We just call it existence. Because you do active damage, you must then try and undo it by this conservation effort, right? Whereas actually we've been in our practices, because this is what I'm talking about with the foundation, right? The foundation of it is, so if the foundation of many Eastern philosophies is my job is to look after nature, you don't actually then contend with, you'd be looking for the people who are like damaging. Does that make sense? Because they're the people going against what it is you do. Whereas actually lots of, we say white as a shorthand for Western, but those of us who've been here for generations, we adopt this Western mentality as well. So it's not like very specific to race. It's just much more specific to the philosophies and ideologies that grew in these countries that tend to be Western, that tend to have white dominant like people here that are the main colonizers. But I do think it's the way the conservationist and even the word conservationist, like that necessarily means that the foundation is not to do that, right? The implicit framing within that is that we have been doing damage, therefore there is a need to conserve, right? Whereas other people don't. They have a need to do other things until the West got involved and was just like damage. And now they're like, we should probably try and undo what they did because that wasn't in our practices. Anyways, all this to say, if you own the frame, you will own the narrative. And that is true of the conservation ideology. That is true of the colonial framing. And that is true, obviously, of media and marketing and propaganda.
And with that, let's turn to propaganda, I guess. This week's propaganda. So, Saffana and I have brought you a selection of headlines. I just thought you've been doing such a great job with the social media that you've been putting out, talking about how to just unpack the rhetoric of these headlines. And one of your videos this week that I really appreciated was the one where you talked about NPR. You're talking about people think that NPR is in the US is just like presenting the facts. Just the facts. And I had a video recently where I talked about the importance of like why I think it's important that I like cry on social media, because I think we need to like grieve when something horrible is happening, that there's something very like soulless and normalizing about just like reporting the mass deaths of children without any emotion. And I got a lot of these comments about like, please just give me, I just want the news without any crying, thanks, without any emotion, thanks. And when you push people for, okay, well, what is the emotionless media? I think actually even more than NPR, because NPR is considered liberal media in the US. AP, the Associated Press, is supposed to be just the facts. And actually they set like journalistic guidelines about like what types of rhetoric are going to be used. They're really supposed to be the center. And I thought we could just look at this headline and this story, Saffana, and look at the rhetorical acrobatics that the AP is doing in this story. So do you want to take a look at this headline with me?
Stunning. It's a stunning piece of acrobatics. It really is. It's how are they so flexible?
Yeah,
so
right.
Timelines to discuss. They've changed us in reality and in time, space continuum.
Yeah.
We've done so much.
So what's jumping out at you first?
There's just gunfire.
The gunfire.
No, it's just gunfire.
Who killed? Not who.
No.
Gunfire killed.
It's a gunfire. We know the they could be Israelis, but it's there to just be like, it didn't mean to be there. It just was gunfire.
The guns did fire.
And it killed at least. So whenever you don't report the exact amount of deaths, instantly it dehumanizes the idea. Because if you say like 35, then I go, oh, these are all individual 35 humans. If you say at least 25, like kills least.
Which wait, there's a typo. Yeah,
least
at least
just kills least 25.
Yeah.
So at least 25. Could be 2,500.
Yeah.
That's the way we're supposed to read that. That's not the way I'm saying it. That's the way that's written.
No humans. Nothing about who the victims are.
How many died? At least 25. That's how you'd say that. It's like, how many should we get? How many lemons? At least 2. Right? That's what you'd say that to, not how many actual humans lives ended. You'd never actually report that in that way if those humans had weight in your imagination.
Yep.
In Gaza.
And they're killing them, as Netanyahu says. So whenever you have a 2-part sentence, the second thing that you say is what people are going to remember. And we have Netanyahu saying he will allow Palestinians to leave. So in this headline that started about the death, like the murdering of 25 people, we're ending with people being allowed to leave. And the focus is on Netanyahu. So to me, this is just so interesting because it's not, again, they're like the AP is trying to be middle of the road, right? Like facts. There is the word Israeli before gunfire. They're not just going to go ahead and say gunfire kills at least 25 in Gaza, which I feel like we might have seen that reporting 6 months ago. Now there's like this little bit more, well, the gunfire is Israeli. We know where it's coming from. But we have the centering of Netanyahu, right? Who's being painted as the big baddie. I've seen so many articles this week focusing on Netanyahu as the problem. I saw France considering sanctions because Netanyahu is such a rogue actor. You know, because of Netanyahu, these EU countries are saying we must.
The beginning of the ostracization so that they can distance themselves from the person who they've been like this with. But this is how it starts, right? Okay.
But at the same time, they're focusing on what he says, which is that he will allow Palestinians to leave. What a way to phrase ethnic cleansing, right?
Yeah. Honestly, it's crazy.
It's so polite. It's so polite to allow.
It's like when they said evacuate.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest alarm bells, I think, of all time, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's just to what end? When you say allowed to leave, all of that is so loaded. All of it is so loaded. It's going really above and beyond to not allow us any emotion. That's what I think. That's what that is, right? To not allow us to at least let it sink in that at least 25 people's lives were ended. Yeah, and I think it's their use of image instantly is actually quite insane, because if you're reporting deaths of people and you cared about those people, you do tend to give people an emotional thing to cling on to, right? If it's like when they report fear from Israelis, they will give you a photo that enacts fear in you. They reinforce the written message with a visual cue. Whereas this kind of is like, okay, well, there are people, there are things that don't look too destroyed. I don't know how they even managed to get a photo where things don't look too destroyed, huh? It just looks like a hustle bustle in the Middle East. And look, there's a food package coming. So it's kind of okay. So it's supposed to be like, oh, they're allowed to leave. Only the 25 isn't that many. And he says that they're allowed. That's literally how you're supposed to read that. It doesn't even matter also because like what the rest of the article says, and I think we're going to get onto this when we talk about the BBC. But a very good trick to all journalists know is that the person who writes the article does not write the headline. The headline is supposed to frame, and this is where the concept of framing comes in, it's supposed to frame the story in a way that's how it's supposed to live in your head, and then you get an image to reinforce that idea. And the reason for that is they know about 80 to 90% of people will not read past the headline. So
genuinely, one of the main reasons I couldn't continue being a journalist was having editors write the headlines for me. I was like, and I actually started like when I was freelancing, like trying to put in my contract that I would get to write the headline, and editors never budged on that. Yeah, it's wild. The authors are not responsible. I did want to talk about the authors.
Yeah.
Because I noticed, well, this one, it's got kind of caught up, but Melanie, you've got a team. You've got Melanie Lidman and Sami Magdi. And Melanie is an AP reporter based in Tel Aviv, Israel, presumably Jewish. And Sami Magdi is presumably an Arab person living in Cairo, based in Cairo. And they put them together as a team. Maybe that's why this article is so, I don't know, convoluted. But yeah, it's just like look at who, you know. I think that the assumption is like if it's a Jewish Israeli and an Arab person working together on an article, then clearly it must be like unbiased and fair on both sides.
Yeah, I think it just there's the use of, so when people say like unbiased, etc., one of the ways that you can always figure out who's unbiased and who isn't is by usually their choice of adjective and verb. So rather than sometimes yes, a noun, yeah, but like if they usually have an adjective, that is very telling, because by when you write, you can kind of just report things with a verb did this, right? So I've got a noun did this, a person did this action with this verb, right? But the moment someone starts using an adjective or an adverb, that is extremely telling of the details of the picture they want to paint. So something that stands out here is just in that last paragraph on this first page where it says the militant group has refused to lay down its arms. So by calling it militant, this group, it's already telling us the way they want us to perceive it. And the thing that's interesting here is that no other group gets called militant, even though the army,
the Israeli gunfire,
is a military. The most militant, some may say, that they've actually taken the noun. So it's really at this point it's just offensive, I think, to those who want to discern just how blatant it is. So it's if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
And the militant group has refused to lay down its arms as Israel has demanded. No mention that Israel has not refused to lay down its arms as the rest of the world is demanding.
Yeah, also an influx of humanitarian aid. That's what it called it. There was an influx, which is
not a positive word.
A crazy thing to say during an actual famine, like during a design famine.
So during the second half of this story, which is really like 4 stories put together, right? They're talking about the first, they're like, some people got shot while trying to get food. Don't worry about that. Here's this whole, and then we go like looking at just structurally the article, right? How much time are we spending on things and when? So it starts out with 25 people killed seeking aid Wednesday. Doesn't even get its own sentence. The deaths don't even get its own sentence. That's coupled with we're on to Netanyahu and how he's saying people allowed to be a lead. Then he gets a whole 2 paragraphs devoted to Netanyahu getting to say his propaganda, right? Then we hear a little bit more about the people who were killed. They were killed on their way to get aid, right? And then they're talking about the ceasefire. Then we get to why are they needing aid? We finally get to it towards the end of the article, right? But again, we're getting this incredibly passive reporting. The UN and food security experts have warned starvation and malnutrition, as if those things exist independently of anything, are at the highest levels since the war began. And nowhere is it being mentioned. Nowhere is it mentioned that Israel has the reason that the starvation and the malnutrition is occurring. So this is your unbiased news, right? And then at the very end of the article, we get several paragraphs just talking about what baddies Hamas are, just to remind us.
That's what I was going to say.
Don't forget October 7th. They're going to remind us of it at the end of this article. That truly, like, there's not even a good transition there. There's not even like we just go from the UN and its humanitarian partners are doing everything possible to bring aid into Gaza. Don't forget about Hamas. Don't forget about October 7th. That's the transition right at the end there. So wild. Anyways, there's your AP. There's your Associated Press, your unbiased news source. It's incredibly biased.
Everything is calling it an offensive. Can we just go to the next one?
Yeah.
So I think thank you for giving us a rundown of the structure, right? So when we talk about the 25 people that were killed, they barely get a sentence. And then it goes on and Netanyahu gets a couple of paragraphs. And then we discuss, bear in mind, there have still been 25 people whose lives have ended. Yeah. And I think just for if anyone's watching this and they are interested in how they report, not even the deaths or the killing of Israelis, but just what's happening there, just the fear. The fear gets paragraphs on paragraphs and images. So the potential harm, exactly.
The names and
everything to humanize and sympathize with a human that you would want is there to talk about potential harm. Please know that harm is not realized, right? Otherwise, that would have been front and center. So now, when a harm is realized and 25 people minimum, just on this small thing, have lost their lives because of this, it actually doesn't get any airtime. So then we go to UN and what their perception is. And then we've got the acknowledgement of dying of malnutrition-related causes. So that is there to plant seeds of doubt. So that's the 3rd paragraph down. So a health ministry, and so it's not humans, it's not people, it's a health ministry, right? Says that 106 children have died of causes related to malnutrition. That doesn't mean they were hungry. They were just adjacent to malnutrition. Now, then it goes on and talk about October 7th. Now, the thing I really want to talk about here is when they do discuss the verbs and nouns, because the verbs and nouns of choice, like we say, are important. What are you calling this thing? How do you want me to perceive it? Israel's air and ground offensive. That's what they're calling this. Instead of calling it a genocide or a war, they are calling it an offensive. It's an air and ground offensive. It's not an obliteration of lives. It hasn't da-da-da-da-da. They're leading with offensive. It's displaced most of their... So it's not that it's moved them out. It's not that it's killed them. We want to focus on displacing first. Destroyed vast areas and pushed territory towards famine. Just pushed it towards... It hasn't actually caused a famine. It's pushed it towards that way, right? And then we get to, it's buried in there. It's killed more than this many people. According to, not actually, according to. And yeah, which does not say how many were fighters or civilians. And again, even in the acknowledgement, I want you to, it's really quite intense.
It's like 61,000, but who knows how many of them were Hamas? And remember, we just reminded you, you're supposed to hate Hamas and they're terrorists. Their lives don't matter.
So it's around half.
Don't be too worried about that.
And again, I think that the important thing that we always want to point out here is if I wanted to create a genocide in front of you and do word gymnastics, this is exactly what I would do. If someone told me this is the brief, I'd be like, all right, cool, just don't call it that, call it an offensive. What's the word that you would, okay, I'll call it an offensive. Do we have to mention them dying? Okay, give it half a sentence, okay, just so we get their views. And then let's talk about Netanyahu. What do you mean? Just talk about Netanyahu. Just say we're telling them to leave if they want to, okay? And then cast out everywhere else. That's literally how I'd answer that brief.
And so, Saffana, like when they're, like, why even mention the 25 killed at all? Why even mention the 61,000 killed at all?
It's literally so they don't get killed all the way to the end. Literally, just so because you have to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And so this is how you would cocoon it. You'd say at the very beginning,
like you were saying, framing. Absolutely. People are going to get this information. People are going to hear about this 61,000 people being killed, and they're going to have questions. How can we put all this framing around it so that those numbers seem as insignificant as possible?
Correct. It's literally how do you dehumanize a human? This is the exact. It's like a prescription. It's like a literally prescription. Don't give them names. Say they kind of died adjacent to any other active creation from another human. Put it on someone else, like a huge entity, adjacent to a famine, adjacent to a malnutrition, just kind of a cause that someone could die of. And then don't say exactly how many there are. Don't say exactly where they were. Don't say who did it. Just kind of allude to it and then cast doubt over that number. But then also what you should do is you should talk about other deaths that are more important. That's it. It's literally a prescription. How do you dehumanize? This is these things. Make these things vague. Make these things cast doubt. And then talk about where you want the actual attention and grief to be.
That's it's just outrageous. In this Hamas paragraph, the last one on the left-hand column, Hamas-led militants abducted 251 people and killed around 1,200 people, mostly civilians. So they get mostly civilians, even though many of them had served in the IDF. But with the 61,000 Palestinians, we don't know. We don't know if they were civilians or not.
How big is this army? That's what I want to know. There's 1 million people or 2 million people in that Gaza Strip. How big was their army? Like that's just, let's talk about just pure numbers. Like even if they are fighters, like,
You mean Hamas?
Yeah, but this is what I mean. Like it doesn't make sense that you'd be like, this is Hamas. That doesn't make sense. Even if I was on your side, that doesn't just make, that's not how a country works. That's not how it works. 10% of people are not in the military. That's not how that works. So it's just nonsensical. It's nonsensical.
And I can see it, and I can see someone's perspective. Well, I can see an editor's justification of this being like, well, we put the bit at the end to remind you about October 7th because that's the framing for why all this other stuff is happening. But let's remember, that's a choice. Starting with October 7th is a huge editorial choice that ignores the past 77 years before that. The fact that Israel's siege of Gaza started in 2006. You know, the ethnic cleansing. Anyways, the Nakba. We can go way back, right? We can start anywhere. If we're just throwing in, you know, war crimes.
Yeah, literally. Just by the way, this.
Why are we choosing this one?
Yeah.
who's committed most of the war crimes. Anyways, so I think probably our viewers get it, but yeah.
This is the centrist, you said, Sim. This is the centrist, yeah?
Yeah, this is the most, I think the AP is supposed to be the most centrist, the most just the facts in the United States. And it's so biased. So y'all have to give up on that idea. Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to talk about AI or do you want to talk about the Palestine Action in the UK?
I think, let's mention Palestine Action because I think it's what seems to be and how do I say? It feels to me that the UK is doing its absolute best to keep people away from anything that could actually cause impact. And the way that they've done this is they've seen the way that Palestine Action has captured the hearts and minds and imaginations of lots of people. And who is in Palestine Action is actually very damning to the UK. And so they are wanting to make an example of them, but they're actually not saying what the consequences to the UK are of this. And so for context,
so as an American, yes. Let me, or as a USian, I always try to use the term.
USian? It's funny.
What is the vibe in the UK? What are attitudes around? So I guess for people who don't know, real quick, like, what is Palestine Action? What's been going on in the UK?
So Palestine Action started a long time ago. They're not just new, by the way. So they've been around for a while. So they've on the boycott.
October 7th.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
October 7th is a blip on everyone else's radar except these people. Like, honestly and truly, like, it's if we're going to talk about catastrophic events, that is really neither here nor there. It just is the linchpin that they're using. Okay, let's just be, again, that framing is hilarious to me and it's hilarious to everyone else, because anyone who's outside of the West, where other people figure it out, they're like, I guess, yeah, like, but here in the West, it's a thing. Anyways, it's not a thing anywhere else, but let's call it a thing. Fabulous. So yes, they existed before this, and what they do is they partake in lots of direct action. And what direct action is, like an example of it, is they will go to one of the biggest producer of arms in the UK, for example, and they will try and block people from going to work. They will go to a bank that is active in funding the genocide, etc., and they will spray paint a branch and main office, disallow people from coming in, and it gives a very visual cue of this is what's happening, right? Now,
and they've even like smashed equipment and smashed windows and I mean, it's been wonderful. I love it. I'm here for it. It's been wonderful seeing it from the US, where we really don't have those kinds of direct actions, like seeing people breaking into property, smashing windows, videotaping it and putting it on social media. And I think the reason that you don't see that happening in the US is that our cops have guns and would kill you immediately. Same reason you don't see some of the more like aggressive climate protests in the US, because our anything to do with infrastructure, it's like terrorism. And so I feel like you were like chained yourself to the gates of an oil pipeline, you could face like extreme terrorism charges. And it looks like that's what the UK is trying to adopt, to be more like us, so they don't have people throwing red paint on the roofs of their weapons manufacturing buildings.
Yeah. And if you think about the thing that does to disrupt someone in the UK's chain of thought is like, this person just, so in the US that might be normal. You chain yourself to a thing and you could get shot at. To us, if you did that, that is like a fascist state. Like, we'd be like, we are actually descending into fascism. If the consequence of protest was death, we would be like, wow, no, the UK, that's too far a jump. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So maybe in the US, no offense to the USians, and this is why sometimes when we look at you, we go, how can you not see that's a fascist state? Yeah. It just so happens that now people are getting deported in front of your eyeballs, but trust and believe they were getting deported before, but that's fine, right? Same with us, by the way. Like, so there's some things that go hush, 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 hush. But to us, it's one of the biggest manifestations, right? Anyways, so what the UK have done, sorry, no offense to the US, sorry if I've bummer.
No,
I feel like
we are a fascist nation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sorry, it's really crazy.
Selectively fascist. Selectively fascist. We've done a very good job maintaining the illusion of democracy for a certain number of people. Who mostly
I still think having this thing of like right and left media, liberal media in the US is like one of the last things that's gonna fall, where people go, wait a minute, it was both both of them were not goodies the entire time. But anyways, I think the UK is coming to that as well.
Getting there with my mother. I'm getting there.
So slowly.
Yeah.
Keep repeating. We're actually raising mothers somehow across the globe. But okay, so Palestine Action. They've been doing lots of direct action. And okay, so when you hear Palestine Action, I think what happens in a lot of our minds is that we go, these are just some kind of rogue Palestinians, rogue Muslims, rogue Arabs who are doing this. Actually, it's not. It's usually like middle-class white youth who are like, this is what I'm going to do because justice is justice and I can come out of this and probably get a job and blah, blah. So it's those who technically have a lot to lose and they go, I should be the one. Like they've understood like you can say they've understood the assignment to a T, because they're like, there are other people who could act and they're willing to, but I will take this, right? So if you think about, and that's because that's the ethos of Palestine Action. They understand the way that they're in a corrupt kind of hierarchy of power, and so therefore they use it to their advantage, etc., etc. Now, the UK recently has said the Palestine Action Group is a terrorist organization. That's what they've said. So, and to me, that is an indicative of genuine failure to indoctrinate people into believing that this genocide is okay. Because one of the last things you would do is you would say to associate yourself with this is terrorism. And obviously, terrorism is the boogeyman of the West.
We've talked about the word terrorism before and the pitfalls of even us using it and being like, no, we're not terrorists. Like Israelis are terrorists. Like the word terrorism doesn't have a clear definition beside people for whom there are never under any circumstances allowed to use violence, even in self-defense. And they're people to whom any amount of oppression and human rights violations are justified. So
sounds about right.
As a leftist, we shouldn't actually be trying to designate anyone as a terrorist. I don't think, because if you're going to try to maintain the universality of human rights and you're trying to build towards a world where like human rights are universally protected, you can't have this class of people who are just baddies, who are just like orcs from Mordor, who anything is justified against them. Like allowing that framing to exist without pushing back on it constantly every time you see it is, I think, really dangerous. And you actually convinced me of that, but well, we talked about it.
Yeah. Because it's again, it's the end result of that is to advertise the apocalypse to us. Like if you take that to its extreme, that's what that is doing, really, right? If you take that to its end result. Okay, so I think we've set the context. So that's what Palestine Action is. They said this against them, and then what happened was people, as a response, were like, "Okay, we've got to protest this because that doesn't make sense." Now, what I'm interested in is actually the way that the BBC reported this, and the BBC again is the unbiased news in the UK. Okay, now it's called BBC because it's the British Broadcast Channel. Right? Which necessarily means it's state funded, so it's state run. So anything the state does, it cannot necessarily say I'm right wing, left wing, etc. It can just say the state, right? But it can never say boo state. It can say not right wing, left wing, but it can't say boo state. Okay, that's really important because sometimes the state isn't a goodie. But of course, if you're the mouth of the state, you cannot say I'm a baddie. So you must just calm everyone down. It's that keep calm and be still or whatever it is. I kept on saying keep calm and carry on, right? So the BBC is the keep calm and carry on. We're creating genocide. Yes, we are working our way towards fascism because we can't kill them. So we're just going to arrest them. But don't worry, keep calm and carry on, right? Okay, cool. So we're just going to figure out how it does that with words. That's why I picked this. So before I think we read this, I'm just going to tell you just what happened. People heard Palestine Action was going to be not outlawed. Yeah, it's called terrorism. Then they said, we will do a protest. Then they went towards Trafalgar Square, central London, and they sat. What is important is who these people are. The majority of them, and there were almost 500 and something, were old white people. I just want you to understand that. Some of them were disabled.
Well done, old white people. You know, y'all get a bad rap, but
and there's one of my favorite videos that has ever existed. It was taken by The Guardian, and please, I recommend anyone to go watch it. It's literally old, very washed white people, very posh, very well-to-do. Okay, very, very well-to-do, and they're going. Well, I think it's very important for us to go outside and protest because I'm retired. I don't fear losing my job, so we might as well do something. And then one old man is saying, they're going, oh, you're writing very nicely there. You've got very good handwriting, because he's writing, I support Palestine Action on a big, and he's literally like an old white man. He's going, that's very good writing. And then he goes, oh, you're going to arrest us, are you, later? You go, that's, and then one guy goes, I'm very excited. I've never been arrested before. Okay. I just want you to know the Brits, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes boo white, but sometimes glorious humanity.
Yeah. Great use of your privilege.
Yeah. I mean, why would you not? Okay. So in a time where we can, like I just did now, exude hope in you. This is what the BBC did. Okay. We'll take it from that. You take it from it. You can talk us through this. I don't know if you read it.
Me take it through. Oh, no. You, this
was I do it? Okay.
We can, so, I mean, after mass arrests, so that's again, we see the thing where we've got two clauses in a sentence, right? And it's like, the first thing is like, whatever, the first, after mass arrests, forget about that. What happens next with the Palestine Action ban? So the focus is on the Palestine Action ban, I guess, that's what I'm seeing from the headline. And don't worry so much about those mass arrests.
But you should look at this video, because if you were white and you were thinking about protesting, by the way, this is one of the younger ones. The average age of those who were there, who were arrested, is 52. So for you to pick a young one on purpose is to send a message to the young ones.
She looks not young to me.
But you know,
but 52. Not tan.
she's enjoying, right? And this is the response, this amount of police. Now I want you to again remember there were 500 people, so not everyone got this many police people. Most people literally were just like, yeah, come on then, let's go, where are we going? Oh, take me. Oh, that's exciting. Oh, it's a police officer. Like those people doing that because they don't care really. What are you gonna do to them? And it's 500 people, and someone was literally like, you know, that's 500 people, that's a lot of people. Anyways, so they want you to understand that they're clamping down hard. That's what that means to me. The state, because again, BBC, British broadcast channel. The BBC wants you to know this is how Britain takes if you support a place, or it's not a place, even though it is a place, Palestine Action, even after they've been banned, quote unquote. Okay, cool.
So we're focusing on all those cops coming after you.
All those, that's what I mean. So the repercussions.
Look at this wall of cops, and this pose.
All of them burly, none of them fat, all of them big.
What I noticed in the first sentence there is that it's not that the protest was unprecedented. It's that the pictures from last week's sit-in protests were unprecedented. So like already that's starting off with a little bit of suspicion. Like maybe you've seen some of these. I haven't seen all these videos. I think I saw one or two videos. I haven't seen the ones you mentioned, but maybe you've seen some of the social media from these mass protests. They were certainly unprecedented pictures, but like, here's why we're going to tell you not to believe everything you saw. I don't know.
Yeah. So now what they're doing is they're saying to you, they're almost like backing out, by the way. That's how this feels to me, right? Because we go with this photo, and then you go, this is the pictures from the last week, and it's a sit-in protest. They didn't do anything. They literally sat there with placards. I want you to understand. And then they were arrested, okay, which is insane. And they knew that it was going to be bad, which is by the way why I made a skit about it, because it does look extremely fascist that you would literally, and some of these old people were disabled, like they were just, and it was like, how are you going to arrest a man in a wheelchair? My guy, he's 80. Where are you going to take him? Anyways, demonstration, they held up the placards reading, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. There was 522 arrested on suspicion of breaking the terrorism laws. Again, just funny for old white uncles. More than double the total arrests in 2024. Okay, fabulous. Then, so they want you to know, like, we didn't arrest that many in 2024, but it's going up. It's going up. Okay, cool. Then it goes on to talk about the organizers. How's it going to end? We're just talking about logistics. Okay. Then it says one lawyer says it has been awkward so far for police officers. And that's the last small paragraph there. And I just want you to know that in Britain, that's you laughing in someone's face. It's been awkward. Like, we hate awkward. Our whole life is awkward and we hate it. Okay. Then I've seen police officers look incredibly uncomfortable with the fact that they are having to treat the elderly people like criminals. Right? And that's them going, okay, cool. Now we go on a little bit more to talk about how funny this is. So you get lost in the comedic value of this ridiculousness. Because
I see this as, look, 3 paragraphs about the feelings, the fifis of police officers before we haven't said anything about why these people are protesting. We haven't said anything about Palestine. We haven't said anything about genocide. We haven't said anything about starvation and famine. No, but we have 3 whole paragraphs, that right column, about the feelings of the cops feel weird about arresting old people. Oh, so sorry for them. All right, you want me to go on the next page?
Yeah, because this is what I was like. This is actually then there's more. We actually are not even going to go through all of this.
It's a long article. Yeah.
There's so it goes on and it talks about more Palestinian action, and it's just more literally just random stuff about Palestinian action, and it's like this is the history of it. This is who's involved in it.
They make a big deal on the the 3rd column there. They make a big deal that like you may have seen the videos of property damage, but did you know there were assaults? And apparently there's no like evidence of this, but a couple of security guards, 3 people were injured, a security guard and 2 police officers.
Yeah. What I want to just talk about, just really obvious, I think the most obvious thing here, is that at this point, even people who are watching, I think we've lost interest in the article. So I want you to go to the next page. Okay. At this point, let's be very honest. Unless I gave you this as homework.
Yeah, are you reading all that?
I do not think you will read this, which is why I want everyone to just look. The only thing I really want you to take away from this, because this is long, and I do not think people will read 1,500 words on this. I want you to just look at that first paragraph in the last column. Volker Turk, the United Nations human rights chief, got involved too, saying the ban is so wrong it places the UK outside international law. For me, that's a headline. If the chief of human rights in the UN says the UK is outside of international law for this ban, that's a headline. That's not a tiny paragraph. So to me, if you were genuinely wanting to talk about this and you're not the BBC, you would start with that. You'd be like, there's a ban. People were protesting. The chief of the United Nations human rights, says this ban places the UK outside of international law. For me, the reason, and by the way, the reason I do that is the same reason they would not, is because that would give people hope who wanted to stand behind Palestine Action. And that's why I want you to take away from this. The BBC has to defend the state. The state has been said to be outside international law by this man. Necessarily, that means that you don't want me to have any hope. Does that make sense? And that's why I want you guys to understand. The visuals of that is do not get involved with Palestine Action. Even if you're old and disabled, we will arrest you. 522. You don't think we're going to come for you, Mr. Middle Class White Man? We're going to come for you, okay? Don't worry about the fact that people think it's outside of international law. And there's no way that we just want the spectacle, because you're not going to win this. You're outside of international law for banning this. That's why people are pissed off and they're willing to do this. But if I wanted to give you any kind of hope, I'd tell you that it was outside international law and that we're probably going to lose a court case. But you can't do that, especially not if you're the BBC. So that to me is a headline, but it's been buried there. And that's all I want you guys to take away.
There's also what I noticed at the end there. So we were talking about the framing is important, right? So a court case is going to decide whether or not this ban stands, right? Which is that's what all of that we just kind of skimmed over was talking about. The BBC can't control, and the government actually can't, they can exert a lot of pressure, but they can't necessarily control the outcome of that court case, right? But the way it's summarized at the end here, which again, maybe you read the beginning of the article, maybe you skim all the way to the end to see what happens at the end. It's framed as a win-win for the government. They're saying if the ban falls, then the group may feel emboldened, but would know that it could still be banned again if its actions cross the terrorism laws line. So, this isn't an enormous embarrassment for the government if the ban falls. It's going to put this group in its place, right? Yeah. And then if the ban stands, the advantage will be with the government, and arrests and charges will continue. And then we get this last line, which is totally editorial. That is the counterterrorism policing way. Slowly but surely, step by step, seek to contain and ultimately crush the threat. We've lost all pretense of impartiality here on how the author feels about this. Like, this author wants to crush the threat of terrorism.
And the threat is like 80-year-old Nans, man.
Yeah.
just again, just so we don't get lost in the source of the BC trying to make us lose ourselves in. It's really like there's a genocide. There is a way to protest that is actually going to embolden people to do more stuff. And that is so offensive that we have to call it terrorism. It's not, but let's call it that. But we can't afford to lose this battle, so let's outlaw it. Let's string it out in the thing while we enact whatever it is we need to do. We can act like the goodies as we say that Palestine could be a state, and we distance ourselves from Netanyahu, and then we're going to do this. That's all it is. It's just buying time.
Yeah. Yes. We had one comment from a viewer of a recommendation. There's a good Upstream podcast episode with someone who was arrested who had tried to start the now defunct PAUS. So I might go try to find that because I'm very interested in that.
Go for it.
Should we talk about AI and sort of pivot?
Let's go.
Story for y'all. Okay. So I want to talk about AI, just something completely different so that we're practicing, because I think we're getting good at spotting these rhetorical tricks when it comes to reporting on Palestine. It was really important to look at what is missing when you're looking at reporting on something. This is CNN. CNN is liberal media light liberal media, right? MSNBC.
That's really funny.
When you read stories on CNN about the Trump presidency, you almost always find within that article like pushback against whatever Trump is doing. So like, here's what Trump is doing, and then here's some like liberals talking about why it's bad. You almost always see that. So when it comes to partisan things, CNN is going to present the news in such a way that makes the Democratic perspective look good. When you read reporting on AI, I've noticed, and other certain topics, you don't find any pushback, really. There's no pushback. It's just presented as a positive and neutral thing. So I wanted to look at this article and look at how that plays out. So because it's kind of stunningly positive for an article that's about something the Trump administration is doing. And it's not giving any pushback to something the Trump administration is doing. And knowing that people who are reading this are expecting that pushback, that really makes us susceptible to thinking that AI is just like a net good for humanity. But we shouldn't be worried about that. So U.S. Department of Defense awards contracts to Google Musk's xAI. All right. Anything about that headline jumping out to you?
It's a good thing. It's award. You've got the word award in it. Yeah.
Look at that verb. You were talking about the importance of verbs. Yeah. We're getting someone getting an award. That's so positive.
They smashed it.
Yeah. We got a picture of the Pentagon. You're making me think more about pictures, which I know I always kind of skim over the pictures because I'm like a text.
That's official.
Person.
That's what that is.
You're right. It's so official. It's the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we get OpenAI, Alphabet's Google, Anthropic, which, by the way, side note, I'm going to be joining a class action lawsuit as soon as I can figure out how against Anthropic, because apparently all of us authors who had our books ripped off to create the language learning model for Anthropic, a court approved us to do a class action lawsuit. No way. And I could win up to $150,000 per book. This is never going to pass, but I could win up to $150,000 per book, which could mean $600,000. No, because it's 4 of them.
So cool.
Yeah, $600,000. Yeah, I mean, it's never. I'll probably, if the court ends up going through and getting resolved, it'll probably be like I was like part of a BetterHelp class action lawsuit. I got like $7, I think. But yeah, they ripped off our books. Anyways, Anyway, so we start off, we're listing these AI companies have won, so again, positive verb, contracts of up to $200 million each aimed at scaling up adoption of advanced artificial intelligence capabilities in the U.S. Department of Defense, the government agency said on Monday. How positive does that sound?
It sounds like a party.
We're scaling up adoption, advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. And, this is why I want all of us peoples and leftists to stop using the term AI, because it's not intelligence, right? Like, there's no intelligence behind artificial intelligence. It's a we should be using large language model. They awarded $200 million to large language models, but we're already accepting unquestioningly that a chat bot, right? Or call it a chat bot. They're giving $200 million to chat bots. We're not saying that. We're saying advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. Then, okay, so it goes on. The contracts will enable the DoD to develop agentic AI workflows and use them to address critical national security challenges, the department's chief digital and artificial intelligence office said. So there's no questioning of what that is. There's no, what are critical national security challenges, and how would AI or chatbots, which is what all of these OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok, this is Elon Musk's AI company xAI, that's Grok. These are all chatbots which lie, chatbots which studies have been shown like hallucinate and, report things that aren't real, chatbots that have recently been, going rogue and telling people to commit crimes and, that have no filter. These are chatbots that the people who develop them are very upfront about, like, don't fully understand how to control. And we're putting them to address critical national security challenges, and there's no pushback from CNN. Right? There's no questioning of this narrative. Then we get another this is a press release from the DoD being reported by CNN without any commentary, right? We get another press release quote. The adoption of AI is transforming the DoD's ability to support our warfighters and maintain strategic advantage over our adversaries. No pushback. Paragraph, U.S. government agencies have been expanding their use of AI, driven by a White House order in April promoting adoption. Trump has also moved to soften regulation by revoking a 2023 Biden-era executive order, which sought to reduce AI risk through mandatory data disclosures. That's maybe the one piece that's giving a little bit of, like, a partisan poke in the tummy, but, like, they're not pushing back on these PR statements directly from the DoD. And then they had.
I don't think they can. Go on. Sorry.
xAI announced a suite of its products called Grok for Government.
This feels bad.
Doesn't this feel horrible? Isn't this terrible?
Grok for Government feels bad.
Yeah, Grok for Government. And so, like, I've just seen, because I follow leftist reporting, I've seen so much recently about there's so much that could have been mentioned in this article, right? You could have talked about the data center. Okay, all these AI companies are getting $200 million each. Let's talk about how their data centers are already, like, stealing up everybody's groundwaters, polluting the air in Memphis. People are, like, being diagnosed at a young age with COPD after data centers open in their area. Like, they're poisoning our land and water, soaking up all our aquifers. And we're not going to mention that. We're not going to mention the pollution. We're not going to mention the AI hallucinations. We're not going to mention the fact that chatbots are not actually intelligent thinking. They're just predictive text generators, and they lie and they hallucinate. I think it's wild. I just think this is a press release directly from the Department of Defense, and it was released on CNN, which is supposed to be the liberal outlet. And usually CNN is giving pushback to everything that Donald Trump does. And everything the administration does is framed negatively by CNN, but not this. This is framed very positively.
I have I have lots of feels.
Yeah. Share them, please.
At what point are we going to realize that the left media is the right media and there's no such thing? Yeah. Right? So, and I think this is what came up last time when we were talking about Elon Musk firing his people and the way that that was explained. And it was like, why is everyone positive about it? And it's like they're the same people. Actually, it make that they necessarily want you to perceive this in this way and only in this way. So they only agree when it's like there's no other way to frame this, and they disagree when it's like both perspectives are fine, right? Yeah, so it's it's really quite heartbreaking. I don't know. Grok for government, that sounds like almost like a spoof of what you would need to say to spook someone out of believing that AI is the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Like it sounds funny.
To a point where you go like that sounds like oligarchy, like wet dreams.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to say that. Like, oh yeah, that's really, yeah, I made an AI and now it's for government. Like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't have to enact my badness. Grok can do it for me, and Grok's much worse than that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a horror movie that writes itself.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they quoted that and made for us to be like, yay, Grok for government, rather than like Grok for government. That's deeply concerning. Grok is there for you to argue back and forth with, not so it can run your government.
Yeah, this is incredibly sinister news.
Yeah, it's not good. It's a lot of sadness, actually, and it makes me be like, maybe this is the beginning of the end. Like, genuinely and truly, like maybe that's genuinely, this is how it happens.
Well, I think, see, my fear of AI is it's just another AI is just another bubble. It's like NFTs were, like crypto is a bubble. I mean, crypto's still going on. But like AI is going to be, it is definitely a bubble. What it can do has way more limitations than the way it's being like sold to the globe right now. And it causes just as many problems as it solves. So like you fire people and replace them with AI, and then you end up having to hire people to fix everything the AI is doing. And I think like more and more businesses are in the phase where they're starting to like figure that out. But capitalism demands bubbles. Capitalism demands you keep having bubbles. You keep having cash cows that are just like fountains of money, right? And we've literally run out of like natural resources, like the planetary boundary, like the physical matter of the planet. Like we don't have countries we can like fully invade and colonize anymore to create these bubbles. And so the digital frontier, right? We keep getting these digital bubbles since the 90s. And AI is being sold as the next big digital bubble. And it's very much a bipartisan effort. And that's when you should really pay attention, is when the Republicans and the Democrats are identical on something, which they are on Israel and they are on AI. And they need this bubble to pan out and to be making them tons of money, because if they don't keep having bubbles, the whole capitalism collapses, and then we really go into, a terrible recession and depression and everything, because that's the nature of capitalism. So but I think AI is much more sinister than NFTs were sort of just a silly thing to like con a lot of rich people out of money, and some not so rich people who made some poor investments in gorilla cartoons. AI is going to just AI in government is going to wreck so many mayhem. I mean, like they're using AI right now. United Healthcare is using it to deny people's insurance claims, so now imagine your citizenship, your court case, your, adoption paperwork. Like every government function is going to be funneled through some crappy AI that hallucinates and lies and isn't actually intelligent and doesn't know any of your context and is not a human being. And yeah, I think it's going to cause a lot of mayhem. I think these companies each getting $200 million is worrisome. I think more data centers, more AI is very worrisome. And yeah, anyways, but we're being sold it, right? What's advertising apocalypse? They're advertising.
This is it, yeah. I think if anything's advertising the apocalypse, is this.
This is such clear advertising the apocalypse.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's an
This is like I say,
award.
yeah.
It's
Reading between the lines,
up.
this is much more worrisome than most other things.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Yep. On that
on that positive note.
It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. It's nice to get nerdy about words. I hope everyone got as nerdy as we needed them to, and we didn't lose you guys.
Yeah, I hope this format, let us know this format was good. If you like us just kind of picking a couple news stories and going through them with a fine-tooth comb,
or maybe just headlines. I feel like maybe because it almost we're gonna have to I don't know how to say it, but like rejig the actual thing of like people are so attracted to headlines because they're attractive, and then it's just difficult not to be like, fine, then we'll just do headlines.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're gonna recreate. Anyways, okay. Hopefully same time in a couple of weeks or something. Next month.
Yeah, next month, end of the month.
All right, beautiful.
Well, yeah, let's see. So we messed up. So this was like June's so we probably won't do one by end of August, but we could pick it up again end of September.
We'll do that.
All right. Have a good
morning.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.